you right off the top, and you may have missed this question, but do you feel as though you're living out the heritage of your great-grandfather every day?
I feel like that I've always lived trying to do the things that he would have perhaps approved of and thought that were necessary in order to move our communities forward. And so I've really spent most of my life trying to make sure that whatever I was doing, that it would be a positive way in order to help our community.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, and it's impossible to boil down, but what do you think was one of his most significant achievements?
Well, I really think his most significant achievement was the willingness to share what he had been afforded the opportunity to learn with other people who had just been freed from slavery, because he had had the opportunity as a boy, without anyone knowing, to grow up with the slave owner's son. And as children, they played from birth up to they were adults. He was freed. And so during that time, when the slave owner's son went to school in the evening, when he came home, my great-grandfather, and he would go to play, and he would teach my great-grandfather whatever he had learned that day, and they would go to the lessons and do those kind of things.
So he taught him how to read and all those, oh boy. Ms. Bostic, if you're still there, are you still there? Okay.
Am I still here?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Go ahead. So he would.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can. Can you hear me? Good.
Okay.
So he would teach him.
So he learned how to read, do mathematics, and all kinds of things that the other people had not learned. And he couldn't tell anybody at the time he was a slave, because he would have been severely punished or killed at that time. So once he was out of slavery, he was able to share that information with the community, and thereby starting schools in the church and teaching them how to buy and to sell and to do all kinds of things that he had learned as a slave. But it wasn't something that I guess the slave owner thought that he would ever be able to use as a free individual, because at the time, there was no thought of freedom for us.
Now, how old was he when he was freed from slavery?
I'm sorry.
How old was he? I tell you what you do. Why don't you tilt your phone so that I see more of your face and less of the ceiling? Good, that's perfect. That's perfect. So how old was he when he was freed from slavery?
You say, how old was he?
How old was your great-grandfather when he was freed?
I'm not really sure, but he was a grown man, because he had a family. And when he came out of slavery first, before at the Emancipation Proclamation, then the slave owner in Virginia, he was from Virginia, and so was his wife. They were on different plantations. And the slave owner that his wife and children were on came to Texas in order to be able to continue having slaves. And so he had to go, in order for him to take care of his family, which he wanted to do, he went back into slavery in order to come to Texas to be and take with his family.
So he had to go back to slavery, back to Virginia to get them, or back to Texas to get them?
No, he came with them. He went back into slavery in Virginia after he had been freed.
Wow, that is an incredible story. Ms. Bostic, just go ahead and prop your phone right there. That's perfect. If you just put it right there, that's a perfect spot for it. Can you lead it? Okay, just put it down so it doesn't look wobbly. That's perfect. That is perfect. But that's an incredible story. I never realized that. So when he came to Houston, when he came to Texas, that was when he decided to help set up schools and the church, is that right?
Yes, after he was freed from slavery. They were in Texas, they were slaves in Matagorda County. And after the announcement by General Granger in Galveston, then the slave owners told them if they had to leave, and they had to leave with nothing other than the clothes on their back. If they stayed, however, they could stay if they were willing to continue to stay there and work and not be paid, because the slave owner was not going to pay them for doing work.
So instead,
that's how deep the people who owned slaves and who left the East to come to Texas with their slaves felt. They did not believe that they should have to give up their slaves.
Wow, that is an incredible story. So for him, the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation in Galveston was personal. That affected him and his family directly.
Yes, that affected him. That affected all people in Texas and surrounding areas that still had slaves, that were enslaved.
So tell me why it was so important for him to buy the property where Emancipation Park sits right now.
Well, it was important because at that time, the people who had been previously enslaved really had nowhere to go to have activities of recreation. They had Juneteenth starting from the time they were out of slavery. Every year, Juneteenth was a big day for them. They dressed up, they rode their horse-driven carriages, and there are pictures and artifacts at the Houston Public Library that tell the story. But they had no place that they could go and do a celebration, a big celebration together. So this owner of that property knew my great-grandfather, and my great-grandfather was always buying property in the Houston area. He understood the value of it. And so he was always talking to the man about buying the property. The man at first didn't really want to sell it to him, but he just kept, I guess, pestering him and letting him know he really wanted to buy the property. And so finally one day he told him, okay, you can buy it, but you're gonna have to put some money down on it now. I can't wait. And so what little money my grandfather had, he went and got it and took it and gave it to the man to hold it until he could talk to his congregation and talk to Reverend Dibble at Trinity. They were near each other in the area downtown, and see if they could get the people to pool their monies together so that they could buy the property. And sure enough, they all agreed to do it. And that's how we got Emancipation Park. And there were no other parks in the city of Houston. There were really, at that time, no parks in any area that was actually a part of Texas.
Wow, so it was really one of the first parks established. And it was one of the only parks, as I understood it, where Blacks could go, is that right?
I'm sorry, it was one of the only ones that what?
Where Black people could go, Emancipation.
Well, it was the only one that Black people could go to, because Black people could not go to places where people who were not Black went, period. Yeah. Blacks had to come up with their own institutions. They had to develop their own businesses. They had to develop and do the things they needed to do to survive once they had become free.
Where did your grandfather get the money? Was it his money plus everybody in the church? Is that how they came up with the money?
Well, the initial money he gave the man, it was really his money. Mm-hmm. But after that, he was able to get the other people in the community, the people in the church, the people in the community to pay, to completely pay for it.
Do you feel when you're over at the park now, especially now that it's so updated? Do you feel like you're standing on hallowed ground? Like this is your great-grandfather's dream?
Well, I feel like it's important ground that we as a people should respect, that it is something that we decided to do as a people, that we did as a people when we had not been out of slavery for maybe around 7 years. And at that time, there were no institutions and things in the city for Black people that they had not put there for themselves. So from the churches, which was really kind of the building block, the start of where they could go, where they could learn trades, and where they could learn how to take care of themselves independently of anyone else. That was how it all started.
And when he decided to set up the schools, how did he come up with, again, the money, the people to establish, for instance, the first schools in Fourth Ward in Freedmanstown?
Well, first of all, he held school there at the church. Again, churches were the foundation. And so no one was too concerned about what they were doing at the church. They figured, okay, they were just singing and praying, and they weren't doing anything that was going to be of any value to anybody else. But that was how the first school started, at the church with the congregations, with the people. And then they had like little private schools. They started schools that they came up with the money for. But they did things for themselves together as a people.
How did he help create Freedmanstown? I know there were freed slaves who were coming there, but how did they put together Freedmanstown? Because I know your great-grandfather was involved with that.
How did they put together what?
Freedmanstown, Fourth Ward, Freedmanstown.
Oh, well, they put that came together because, again, he had learned the value of when being a slave. He went a lot, the slave owner trusted him. So he would take him out of town on trips and show him different things, help him do different things. So that he learned how to watch him negotiate and trade and do things and use money in different ways. And so he then, understanding that, he also learned about property and how important property was. And so Fourth Ward was not, it was really, when they came into Houston, it began on the Buffalo Bayou. When they first came into Houston as freed slaves, they started off on Buffalo Bayou. And they were probably there a few years before they moved further up into what's known as Fourth Ward, because they had to be able to purchase the land, even though people were not necessarily living there. The land was still owned by someone. And so he knew and understood, again, how to read, how to write, how to understand how the system worked. And so therefore he would get people to save their money as they worked on their jobs. He would buy the property for them. He would make sure it was recorded at the courthouse. He would make sure they would bring money for him to pay their taxes. He did everything to make them establish their community, establish their homes, to get property. And at the schools, at the church, were teaching the kids during the day to read and write, but the adults were also learning to read and write and do trades at night. And so many of them learned how to go out and work and do whatever work was available, but also how to establish their own businesses.
That's incredible. So how did he come to establish Antioch Missionary Baptist Church? How did he establish Antioch?
Well, he and some members of his family and other members of the community established it but when they were on Buffalo Bayou in what was called a brush arbor. That was the first little standing building that they used as a church. And then as the congregation grew, they built another structure on Bagby and Rush Street, which is now part of the City Hall complex. When they outgrew that building, they bought land from whoever owned the land that they now sit on Clay Street, but it was actually on Andrew Street when I was a child. That was the name of the street. But that was where they built the church that now stands, the original church building that was built there.
I've heard in the past that Emancipation Park was really only used for Juneteenth, but is that true? Was it only used one day a year, or was it?
No, it was not only used for Juneteenth. It was used for all types of activities where community and family and friends came together. It was used for other things as well. Describe
for me what the Juneteenth celebrations were like. What were they like, especially those first few years? You must know from some
Well, I would say the first ones, which I've seen pictures from, they came together. They would have large dinners where they would have barbecue and different kinds of food that they all liked, and family and friends. And they would have they had a parade. They would have parades where the women would be dressed up in their beautiful long dresses with big hats. And they had carriages that they had before cars, and the cars would be decorated in flowers. They loved being free, and they never forgot to celebrate being free and understanding what community and family was all about. Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's the bottom line. Juneteenth was about being free, I know. It's about freedom. It's about being free and being able to chart your own course and destiny in life. Do you remember celebrating Juneteenth when you were a little girl? And if so, what was that like? Oh, yes, I remember it. I always loved Juneteenth. It was a day where a lot of people of our race were off from work. But for those who had to work, then it was the celebration for that family or group might not start until the afternoon. But they would have lots of outdoor activities, games. They would have wonderful barbecue food with all the trimmings, watermelon, punch. It was just a fun field day, and everybody looked forward to Juneteenth, because if they could, they would not be working, and everybody would just enjoy the day and talk about freedom. And then for a little while it fell off. People didn't celebrate Juneteenth. Why was that? Why did it get to a point where people were kind of ashamed? Well, that kind of started after integration came about. And for whatever reason, somehow, many of us thought, well, there wasn't a need for a celebration anymore. You were now able to do some things that you had passed that point. And you never get past the point of being interested in your own freedom, because we live in a country where we are only about 12 to 13% of the population. So we are always going to be challenged with situations that may be about our freedom being impeded for some reason or another. And so we have to be vigilant. We have to appreciate what our foreparents have done for us and what we have to do for our children and generations to come, to make sure that their freedom is secure because of what we do and how we live today. I know that originally Juneteenth was celebrated here in Texas because it was started here in Galveston, but now it seems to be spreading across the country. What do you think about the idea of a national holiday for Juneteenth? I think that that's wonderful. I know that there are at least about 41 states and the District of Columbia who at this time have some form of Juneteenth celebration. And I think it's wonderful that there's a recognition that until 1865, that there were still areas of this country and states where people were still not free. And it wasn't just Texas, but most of the states around this Gulf Coast area, people were not free. And so it's important to know your history. It's always important to know where you've been, where you've come from, where you are, and where you want to go. But once you forget where you have been, there's always a possibility you may somehow detour back to that direction.
Well, you certainly know your great-grandfather's history. You must be so proud of him and all he was able to accomplish in his lifetime.
Well, I've always been very proud of what he was able to accomplish as a man that had no real formal education, but just what he was able to learn by being able to be a friend with someone, that it was just, I would say, providential and God's plan that it happened that way.
I know you've dedicated your life to his history and to preserving so many things that are important. What do you want to pass on to not only to your children and grandchildren, but to the rest of us? What important message do you want to send to all of us about our history?
Well, I think it's important to remember who you are, whose you are, and what you are, because it's so easy to forget what the possibilities are and what God-given abilities and talents each individual has been given. And so learn how to utilize those abilities and talents to the best of your ability. No two individuals are alike. Learn how to respect yourself and to respect others, and to understand the relationships are really important. And if you are willing to work with other people and to respect them, then they will respect you and work with you.
Well, I tell you what, we are so proud of you. We are proud of your great-grandfather and the extraordinary work that he has done throughout his lifetime that has benefited all of us so tremendously. Is that why it's so important to you to stay involved with the church and with the Conservancy and the things that he's done?
Did what?
Is that why it's so important to you to stay involved with the Conservancy at the park and Antioch Church and all of the things that he has done?
It's really important because, you know, I have a saying that I learned, someone else told me many years ago, that life is short at its longest. So I truly believe that while you are able to do things, whatever it may be, that you do it, because again, that time will not last forever. And if you know that you can do something, or you can help some situation or help somebody, then do that.
Now, did you know your great-grandfather? Was he still alive when you were a little girl?
No, I wasn't. I didn't have the pleasure of knowing him. I just only knew of him and learned things about him.
Did your family just pass down the history? Is that how you learned so many things?
Yes. I had the great fortune of having two of his granddaughters and a son that at different points of my life, we were living together. And so therefore, I was able to learn quite a bit about their father.
And how did your family pass down the messages? I mean, did you talk a lot to your grandparents, and then they told your parents, and then they told you? How were the stories about Jack Yates passed down in your family?
Well, most of the stories that I learned were actually passed down from his children.
And what did they tell you? What did they tell you about your great grandfather? What did they tell
Well, he was a man that truly pushed them to learn, to do the right thing, to respect other people, to work together, and to work for the community.
There has been talk about building a statue of your grandfather in downtown. Would you like that? Would you like to see a statue of Jack Yates somewhere in Houston?
I would love to see a statue of my great grandfather somewhere in Houston, because I think that he contributed so much to the stability of Houston and to the ability of our citizens to work together. That didn't just start, it started many years ago. And it has a lot to do with the way sometimes we resolve our issues, that other places are not able to do that.
Ms. Bostic, I haven't asked you about your own history making over your lifetime. You've done a lot of historic things yourself. What are you proudest of as you look back at your career and your life?
I guess if I look at my career, I would say I was proudest in my career to be able to help people of color and women be able to move up in the federal system from the bottom of the job ladder all the way up to the top in all kinds of situations, to be able to go into places where I was not even welcome, but able to make a difference in those people's lives when I left there, even though my life might have been threatened. But knowing that my family was supportive of what I was trying to do, and that my children were safe, and that it was something that God evidently wanted me to do and allowed me to do.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Your grandfather passed on those genes of making a difference for other people. You talked about having your life threatened. Did that happen for you? And did that happen for him?
You say, did I do what?
You talked about having your life threatened. Life threatened. Did that happen for you during your?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Really? Tell me about that.
Yes. At a time when I was working in the South, and I was going into places in offices where there were not any Blacks at all. And I would receive threats, yes.
Wow. And I've got to imagine that your grandfather received threats too, especially once.
I'm sure.
Especially once people knew he was teaching other people how to read and buy property.
I'm sure that he did.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Ms. Bostic, I have to tell you, I'm so proud of you. Are you excited about this upcoming Juneteenth? It's a big number.
Oh, yes. At the park this year, everything is on virtual. So all week they've had different programs on. And the theme this year is We Are Juneteenth. And so you can go on the website for the Emancipation Park, and you can turn on programs almost all day, every day through the 19th of June. There may be some a few days after, but the majority of them will be coming up to the 19th of June. And so we want everybody to continue to celebrate the 19th of June, even though we are being in this particular pandemic. We can all do what we should do by putting on our masks and making sure that we stay 6 feet behind each other and wash our hands and wash our surfaces real good. But we can still celebrate, because you can celebrate with your family. You can turn on your Zooms and talk to people and find out what's happening. But just know that we're all blessed to be free and to be able to do most of the things we like to do in life. and to have family and friends to do them with.
Well, look at you talking about Zoom and virtual and websites. I'm so impressed by all of that. But I have to tell you, Ms. Bostic, this is such a pleasure, and I've learned so much about your great-grandfather. Thank you for that. I have a personal question. How old are you?
You said what?
How old are you? That's my personal question. How old are you now?
You say how old? Well, I be.
Yeah. How old are you now?
Oh, I'm 82 now.
And looking beautiful. Looking beautiful. Well,
Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Ms. Bostic. This is such a pleasure. The next time we talk, I want us to be in person, but this is a wonderful way to get to learn from you. Thank you very, very much. And
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to talk with you today. I appreciate that. And I hope that you have a happy Juneteenth, and looking forward to perhaps someday we will have a national Juneteenth.
Me too. I think that would be very, very exciting. And